Somewhere the year is 2029. Human beings are obsolete, flesh and bone, outdated by tungsten steel and titanium. The world belongs to metal, controlled by the vast Skynet system. Death machines prowl the ravaged city. The smells of old blood and hot oil linger in the air. But not all humans have rolled over and died. There are those who would fight to reclaim the heritage that once belonged to mankind.
Dark Horse presents Diablo Frank on Terminator 2 and Robocop.
It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. And it absolutely will not stop. Ever. Until you are dead.
I thought that we were all done with Marvel Terminator content last episode, but literally within the week of that episode's release, I visited a comic shop that I only drop into every year or two. They had a copy of Marvel Age Preview number 2. In the section on movie and TV tie-ins, I was surprised to find a listing for Terminator 2. I'd never seen the logo used here before. There were few creator credits, and the accompanying pencils were vague, a silhouette that could have been pulled from anywhere. But most importantly, this was the 1992 preview book, with a March 1992 indicia date, and the Judgment Day adaptation had been released the previous summer of 1991. This was a new thing that I had not seen referenced anywhere before.
The book went cheap on covers. It's just a bunch of vertical lines with recycled art, including Jim Lee X-Men, Kubert Ghost Rider, Silver Sable, some Epting Avengers, The Night Stalkers, Liam Sharp Death's Head 2, Ron Wagner Morbius, and a generic Punisher. I'm not sure who drew this one. The listing is in the movie and TV tie-in section, also featuring Captain Planet and the Planeteers, Pirates of Dark Water, James Bond Jr., Bill and Ted's Excellent Comic, Toxic Crusaders, and Defenders of Dynatron City. Titled Terminator 2, Time Bomb, this adventure will take place in that unknown period between Terminator 1 and 2, using characters we have already met in the movies. Set in the future of 2031, it outlines the creation of the T-1000 and the cost to John Connor of sending the Terminator back through time to save himself. How did the adult John Connor captured the Terminator? What influences besides his mother did young John have in his early childhood? Expanding upon the concepts of the incredible blockbuster Terminator 2, this 4-issue limited series will offer some of the answers that Terminator fans will travel to the ends of the earth to uncover. Writer Evan Skolnick, editor Mark McLaurin, imprint Marvel, shipping May, format Mondo offset, frequency monthly 4 issues, page count 32, cover price $1.75.
Obviously, this project never saw the light of day, but you can see elements revisited in Malibu's Nuclear Twilight miniseries. As for the sole announced creative, Evan Skolnick was one of those guys who was actively working at Marvel after I was no longer actively reading Marvel comics. It was also that terrible time when Marvel Corporate had decided editors were the primary creative force within their company, and there was a lot of cronyism, where editors would hand each other freelance assignments as writers. Skolnick has 10 pages of editorial credits on the Grand Comics database, versus 2 pages of writing credits, and honestly, many of those are just letters pages. He did a couple of filler short stories in the 1990 Iron Man annual, with his first full script being Robocop number 11, a fill-in issue. More filler in the 1992 Incredible Hulk annual, and then he alternated with other writers on the final issues of NFL Super Pro. Yet more filler for the 1993 New Warriors annual, but then he helped launch the 2099 Unlimited anthology with the lead Spider-Man 2099 story, featuring art by Chris Wozniak. In fact, that feature was his first true ongoing project, at least for the first 3 issues, but after that, he was back to backup features in annuals and Pizza Hut giveaway comics. He seemed to have a good relationship with Fabian Nicieza, because he took over the New Warriors at the end of 1994. From issue numbered 54 to 75, the series' 1996 finale. Further, Skolnick eventually went to work at Acclaim Comics under Nicieza as editor-in-chief, both writing and editing books for them, including scripting over Nicieza plots. Before leaving Marvel, though, he scripted Doctor Strange plots for David Quinn and Warren Ellis. Plus, he wrote the last issues of William Shatner's Tech World, a couple of Venom miniseries, and the last 2 issues of Web of Scarlet Spider. He also did the 1996 Street Sharks miniseries for Archie Comics. After leaving comics, he moved into video games, helping with their narratives and writing their strategy guides. You may be wondering why I'm going so deep on the background of a guy who was supposed to write a T2 miniseries that never materialized. I offer these details as a thought experiment because I figure you've already formed a picture in your mind of more or less what could be expected from the Time Bomb miniseries. However, if it will help, we can circle back to that Robocop issue.
Detroit, the near future. Officer Alex J. Murphy and his partner Ann Lewis fight to rid the decaying city of the criminal element which infests it. After being mortally wounded in the line of duty, Officer Murphy is outfitted by OCP with bulletproof titanium robotic parts and with computer-enhanced motor and sensory capabilities. He has become the ultimate super cop, Robocop.
Let me be real with y'all for a minute. I was proud that I got Dark Horse Presents Aliens out on a more or less monthly schedule dating back to 2021. And then we launched the companion show, Terminator Now, at the end of 2023, and we kept that on a monthly schedule, both of them, throughout 2024. But as you also know, I decided that I was done with that, and starting in 2025, we were going to alternate between the 2 shows month to month. But knowing that neither show was going to be monthly anymore, I've been a little looser with the schedule. Episodes would drop a week or so after the month they were intended for. No big deal. And I had production delays on another show that I've been making sure comes out on a monthly basis, DC Secret Files, and I knew that one had to come out in the month of August. So the plan was that was going to come out on Monday, and then the following Monday I'd release this episode a little late, just a few days really. But again, DC Secret Files kept getting pushed back, and then it ended up being a situation where it was going to be an episode of Who's Who Review on Sunday, which will probably be a couple or 3 hours. And then my longest to date episode of DC Secret Files on Monday, which is going to be a good 2.5 hours probably, maybe longer. And I just didn't want to do that. I'd actually done that once before. I think it's a lot to ask of an audience. I think there's a lot of crossover in the audience. And also because some weird vagaries with YouTube, this stream never uploads to a video for public consumption properly. So the hope and plan was to go ahead and get the DC Secret Files online, let it marinate for a few days, fix the glitches, and then publicize it, which is still going to happen. But now I'm going to push it back a few extra days so that it'll still come out in the month of August. We'll publicize it like the 1st of September or thereabouts. And that means I needed a show to plug in the meantime because I'd already skipped a week. And see, going into this episode of Terminator Now, I knew it was going to be a tricky one because we're returning to Dark Horse this month after all the Marvel material. I knew that there were elements in this one that were going to be adapted into an audio play from the early 2000s. I knew there was going to be a fair breadth of material to cover, so I wasn't going to be seeking a guest. And that probably that audio was going to take up a lot of time. And so I basically put Terminator Now on a shelf 2 months ago, closer to 3 at this point, I think, and just left it alone until a few days ago. Now, thankfully, I was trapped in a Zoom meeting at work. They really could have been an email. And so I took out my tablet and I started reading the material I knew was going to go into this episode for the most part. And so I figured, okay, we're going to do this episode a little different. I'm going to knock this thing out as quickly as I possibly can. But most of my Saturday was taken up with stuff I didn't have any control over. And so I'm really going to pretty much power through this thing live, soup to nuts on Sunday. But see, while I was putting stuff together, I suddenly realized, oh yeah, I'm also supposed to cover Robocop stuff on this show. So fine, pulled out the tablet, read 3 issues on Saturday night, and then realized that I was not going to have the time to properly look at the first arc of Simon Furman's run. So under the circumstances, I have a good excuse to just focus on one issue of Robocop, Robocop number 11, apparently co-plotted by Steven Rupinski and laid out by Alex Alex Trimpe, but final writing was by Evan Skolnick, and final art was by Herb Trimpe. I'm assuming this was a rush job because everybody's getting extra help. The story is titled Unfinished Business, and the plot is you got this dude named Daniel O'Hara, and he's yet another typical OCP scumbag. He diverted funds and borrowed technology from the company for a pet project, and because it's a Marvel comic, it's that they were using brain engrams in place of the actual human brain to create another Robocop type project. But it's basically just a big Iron Man type suit, basically in the Titanium Man mold, just not as distinctive. But it's another situation where you're taking an armored hero and you're creating an armored villain who's just really big, much bigger than the armored hero, and all in green. Of course, in this case, very clearly a capitalist rather than a communist. But they even did the thing where he doesn't have a proper face. It's just elements of the head technology with beating, glowing eyes that are far separated. So they weren't even trying to hide their self-lift. So the catch is Daniel O'Hara gets caught, takes hostages, kills one hostage, is busted by Robocop, who shoots him dead. And after he's dead, they use his brain engrams to implant into the giant robot. Because even though they caught him, they didn't catch the people that were part of his project, all the folks he was paying off, all the scientists and such. So he wakes up, but he's having trouble. His brain's all screwy. He's in a lot of pain. And he decides, well, the first thing I need to do is kill everybody in the room because these are the only people who know how to shut me down. And I'll figure out from there what I'm going to do. But his main concern is that he only wants to be back long enough so that he can kill Robocop and take his revenge. And as a side note, these engrams apparently are broadcasting to Robocop for some reason. And so Robocop initially thinks he's glitching because he keeps getting memories flashed in his mind of when he killed O'Hara, which is a big moment for the O'Hara guy, not a big thing for the Robocop guy. He shoots people all the time. So this is a whole little side thing where Murphy and Lewis bust a couple of punks and they're driving around and she's trying to kind of needle Murphy to get his human side out. He takes umbrage, kind of calls Lewis out for being a little too mouthy. It's also an opportunity to reiterate the basics of who Robocop is. And then we cut over to another couple of like comically caricatured cops. And one of them's got this long face, this lantern jaw, glasses, mustache. Feels like he's a character or somebody that these guys know. The other cop is a really heavyset Latino with long hair. He basically looks like an egg. And so these dudes run into the giant robot, O'Hara, and we spend several pages on them getting killed for it. And you know, O'Hara has like missile launchers and stuff because he's got to be a big hulking robot for Robocop to fight. Lewis tries to shoot like a grenade launcher at him from an armored vehicle, but she doesn't have the range. Robot guy has range. He blows up the car, sends her flying. She's wounded, but she's okay. There's a lot of time wasted with them repeating dialogue, and there's fairly light in dialogue in this section. Way too many nigh speechless panels. For some reason, Robocop was the one driving the car and inside the armored vehicle instead of being the one outside to be better protected while shooting the grenade launcher. He gets out of the vehicle. He tries to reason with the robot dude. At one point, there's some ridiculous thing where the robot actually becomes immaterial, so the missile flies through his chest. So they're not even hiding that they're trying to make this guy the Vision. Finally, for some reason, the trick that was supposed to work is that Robocop blinds the robot dude and then hits him with the missile launcher, which blasts him in the chest cavity. But then as an added bonus, the dude's able to detach his upper portion and fly by rocket, which would make more sense if the missile hadn't hit him dead center in the chest. So anything that was busted would still be part of this. His lower body was fine. He could have just gotten up. But the whole point is to get the robot guy close enough to Robocop so that he can do his data transfer spike thing, shove it into his head. Not only replay memories of when O'Hara himself died, but also Murphy's memories of when he died. And, you know, the dude's like can't handle the trauma that Murphy handled when he was killed off. And his death was way worse than the other dudes. And so he basically fries out and then he's done. And in the end, Murphy and Lewis go to a funeral for the two cops. And then they kind of made their peace with their little tiff they had in the car previously. And in the end, Lewis is like, you were right. No one else can ever understand your pain. And then Murphy's punchline is, no, Lewis, I was wrong. Someone else did. So after letting a robot shade Evan Skolnick in the opening segment, this is definitely not the worst issue of Robocop I've had to read. It definitely helps that there's a lot of panels where I did not have to read much of anything. It's not the worst premise in the world, but you can definitely see the Pizza Hut giveaway skill set coming into play here. The art can be a little crude at times, a little not ready for prime time, but it's still ultimately finished by Herb Trimpe, so it has a baseline quality to it. It's definitely got its Bronze Age fundamentals down. So again, I've read better, but I've read worse.
One more thing. Skolnick decided to do an annoying tick where when cyborgs were accessing certain abilities, they would be represented in text without spaces. You know.
So that all the words ran together.
And you have to waste waste your time as a reader parsing out what should be clearly communicated. It's a dumb stylistic touch that the editor should have overruled. According to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, Robocop number 11 was released on November 20th, 1990. Debuts offered this month on the licensing front were Archie's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Meet Archie 64-page special, Disney's The Prince and the Pauper and Tailspin limited series, plus the 250th issue of Walt Disney's Uncle Scrooge. EC's 300th issue of Mad Magazine eclipses the Hobbit graphic novel and hardcover. Harvey's New Kids on the Block, Hanging Tough number 1, Malibu's Alien Nation, A Breed Apart, Harry Harrison's Death World, and I Love Lucy Book 2, and Marvel's Barbie and Barbie Fashion, plus the 15th and final issue of Count Duckula.
A heritage stolen in the flash of explosions and chatter of bullets.
For freedom!
The battle so far has been one-sided. Muscle and soft tissue have lost out on a planetary scale to plastic and steel. The rule of the metal devils is almost complete. Billions have died.
Com tower negated.
But still some fight back, inspired by a leader, Connor, and his dreams of a time long gone.
Getting back to the Terminator, Dark Horse presents number 138 solicitation copy off the company's website reads, in the bleak future controlled by Skynet and the Terminators, a group of desperate human warriors fight back with everything they've got. Also in this issue, Steve Rude's the Moth, an off-the-wall superhero with a devil-may-care attitude. And what's that they say about a Rolling Stone? X-Men author Steve Siegel tells us all about it in My Vagabond Days. Edited by Randy Stradley. Designed by Corey Stevens. Cover artist Frank Teran. Genre, short stories anthologies. Publication date, December 9th, 1998. Format, black and white, 32 pages. Price, $2.95.
Dark Horse Presents ultimately runs 157 issues. We're going to look at issue 138. I don't know that there's any more Terminator or Aliens content in these last 19 issues. So this might be it, finally, for me doing coverage of Dark Horse Presents, after touch on them a fair amount over the years. By this point, DHP was down to one cover again for a while there was a flip book, and it's a Terminator cover, and it's Frank Teran, so it's pretty striking. It's a pretty cool piece. Teran isn't entirely on model. He mostly is able to do an endoskeleton, but there's a little too much personality in the face, a little too much wiring taking the place of musculature, kind of demonic, very scary looking T-800, and it's sort of standing in flames. And then there's a bit of a collage where you have a fighter craft. I don't think it's anything that we've seen before in the Terminator franchise. It basically looks like something you'd have from the post-Star Wars period, like a TIE fighter, X-Wing, the Buck Rogers ship, the Viper ships from Battlestar Galactica, that kind of thing. So it's flying down and it's shooting blue energy beams at the ground, which has a hint of skull around it, like a pile of skulls. And then there's a rebel with goggles running toward us, and then there's a couple of vague semblances of rebels shooting back at it from the side. All in all, pretty sick cover. Was definitely in contention to be the album art for this episode. Quite metal, but also the majority of this episode is going to be covering material drawn by Steve Pugh. I'm sorry, I'm pretty much always going to favor Steve Pugh over most any other comic book artist. So this issue has 3 stories. Terminator is the first one. It's followed by My Vagabond Days. It was written by Steve Siegel, art by Stefano Gaudiano. Now that's how the credits read. That's actually the 3rd story. It's set in 1968. You got adolescents. One's white, one's black. Black kids gotten beaten up. There's stuff going on with Nixon on the TV. So there's sort of a slice of life quality to this thing. We're seeing civil rights marches and such. I didn't read it. I'm sure a lot of it boils down to racism is bad, but at least it's not a bunch of licensed product of the type of which that the color Dark Horse Comics was supposed to take on. But when that folded, got back into Dark Horse Presents. This is our little indie book stuff. I'm glad to see that it got in there. So the 3rd credited feature, but actually 2nd published, was The Moth, written by Gary Martin, who really does not have anything to do with the art of this book. It's penciled by Steve Rude, who's the creator of the character, inked by Andy Bish, and this is a retro Batman, Spider-Man type character, very Silver Agey. It's got Steve Rude art. That's always going to be pretty nifty. Works extremely well in black and white. I'm sure it looks cool in color too, but you don't need it. Everything you need is already on the page as is. Again, did not read this one. Apparently the Moth is a guy who works at a carnival, or I should say a circus, and then he at part-time vigilante dude, and mostly what we see is him going after after some local gangsters. I'm guessing maybe they were running a protection racket and we're going to target the aerialist family, and Moth put a stop to it, but that's not explicit. But now we can focus on the main story, the Terminator Suicide Run, script by Alan Grant. And again, that's one of the reasons why I want to do what I did on this episode, is we got Alan Grant leaving Robocop and taking over the Terminator. And then you got the guy who was supposed to write a Terminator miniseries, who instead is now writing the one issue of Robocop Recovering. I just like the symmetry of it. Art by Frank Teran, lettering by Gary Fields. So I crack this thing open, I look at the black and white first page, and I'm like, I need to read this in color because this is not something I want to read in black and white. Everything's too ambiguous. Everything is too implied rather than fully rendered. We're starting out on this big scene where there's a giant robo tank going after those goggled rebel guys I was telling you about. And there's a flaming city in the background with big skyscrapers and stuff. I can sit here and I can look at it and I can tell what's happening, but I could tell immediately that this was not a story that I was going to enjoy trying to decipher panel by panel. And again, it's not that the Frank Teran art is bad. It's actually quite good. Dude had some history with aliens that I've talked about. He did some good stuff there too. It has a great sense of motion and immediacy, but it's just too blasted ambiguous in black and white. And my brain just did not want to have to do the work on this. So thankfully, when they put it in the Terminator Omnibus, they colored it. And again, the deal is I've been doing this for a while. I've been looking at these Dark Horse omnibuses for a while. I've seen them color aliens stories that were presented originally in black and white. I've seen them recolor alien stories that were originally in color, but the original colors were like watercolors or something that was not easy to reproduce, or I guess for some reason they decided they didn't like the original colors and so they wanted to go in there and recolor it for their omnibuses. And it's just like fill. It's the flattest, ugliest colors, mostly just approximating what was done previously by other artists, or clearly some like assistant editor or some other production person just like trying to knock something out, take a black and white thing, make it color, put no special work into it. So what's interesting here is there's no credit for who colored this for the omnibus, but I kind of think they must have gone to Dave Stewart, because this one issue short story, anthology story, was published during the run of the miniseries we're going to cover. But in all collections, it's put to the fore, but the association is always there. Whenever they collect this, they collect it with the Death Valley material. There are 3 artists across these 3 features. The other 2 artists are colored by Dave Stewart, and the coloring on this short story is way better than it ought to be, given that they were just coloring it for an omnibus. There's just some really great tones here. There's a lot of fleshing out the basics of what Teran's put to the page. It's really nuanced and it's really pretty. It's just not what I would have expected. And I was so grateful switching from this black and white that I did not want to read to color that was very inviting. So what happens in this short story is you've got a girl who's wearing headphones and listening to music the entire time everything's going on. And you don't necessarily know why that is. And basically what's happened is she was exposed to radiation before she was born, or like while in utero. And so she has like bone cancers and stuff from this exposure. And I think that somebody sat down and did the math on it. I did some research for this, and there's some guys who do all the nitpicky stuff that I read over. I want to say that they had come up with that she had been exposed around 2015 or so, because she's supposed to be 15 now. It's 2029 and she's dying at this point. And so these rebels are carrying her through this war zone. It's 2029, so it's the end of the big push of humanity to stop Skynet, stop the Terminators. And so they're carrying this gal through this gauntlet, and most of the guys are getting killed one by one. Some of these are people she's been associated with her whole life. She feels guilty, but she's also overwhelmed by all the stuff that's going on, and that's why she just keeps playing the music the whole time and not listening to the details as much as she can get away with. They also decide, hey, we're doing a future story. We don't necessarily know what all they have in the future, so they've definitely got people running around on like the hover cycle things from Return of the Jedi or whatever. You know, they don't care. They're throwing in a bunch of influences from a bunch of other sci-fi. They're not keeping it consistent with the James Cameron movies. But there's one Terminator that's the most dogged, kills the remaining rebels, gets a hold of the gal, chokeholds her, is asking her questions about John Connor, but she's still listening to her headphones at full blast. It's very much one of those things where I guess the 2029 future has Walkmans that are able to overcome any surrounding background noise. My gal spends a lot of money on the best noise dampening headphones, and I don't think this works as well for her as this gal's works for her. I guess music is really important in the future since you don't have a lot of other entertainment types. But apparently this gal was like triggered. She was a suicide bomber. She had explosives on her. So when the Terminator's nice and close, she blows up and takes out the Terminator. Why you would go through all this trouble to kill one T-800 besides you're looking to have some sort of an ironic ending, I don't know. So after really liking the artwork for the most part and appreciating appreciating the colors, and the story was all right for what it was, but you get to the end, it's like, wow, that was a complete waste of time. And it totally makes sense why they front load this as part of a collection with all this Death Valley material, because this is definitely the worst storytelling. Get it out of the way, right? It's a nice way of opening things, not how you want to close things, or people are going to be happy at the end of the book, I think.
Somewhere else, the year is 1998. The game is the same. Life or death.
Hold it! I'd been waiting for him since my stakeout of the shop in Furnace Creek. Of course, I didn't expect him to stop. But I'd been on the trail of his Satan-worshipping geek friends for almost a month, and I wasn't going to let it go cold now. Guess Satan didn't hear your prayers this time, chump. On your feet. You're gonna take me to your hideout.
No!
You're a brave guy. Tough, right? Tough enough to walk on 100-degree sand? Sure you are. Walk!
Ah!
Rock-hard salt crystals did a job on him. I remembered reading someplace that the devil doesn't like salt. Couldn't remember why, though. Whatever. Sometimes a little pain is the only way to get what you want.
Okay, just give me back my boots, man.
Nobody knows better than me.
Dark Horse's website offers the following solicitation copy: The Terminator Special. In a nightmarish future, John Connor will lead the remnants of humanity against the cybernetic killing machines known as Terminators. But as a boy in our present, he has his whole life ahead of him, unless the Terminators get to him first. In the unforgiving wastelands of Death Valley, a new chapter is about to unfold. A new pair of Terminators have been sent from the future to find the boy. What's at stake for the lowlife bounty hunter named Van Dirk? And can humanity's future be saved, or does Skynet have another ace up its sleeve? Creators include writer Alan Grant, artist Guy Davis, colorist Dave Stewart, letterer Gary Fields, editor Philip Amara, designer Corey Stevens, cover artist Jeff Darrow, genre science fiction action adventure, publication date August 12, 1998, format full color, 32 pages, price $2.95. Other debuts offered this month include DC Helix's 12th and final issue of Michael Moorcock's Multiverse, Dark Horse Classics, Terror of Godzilla and the Mask, Toys in the Attic, Image's classic Alex Toth Zorro Volume 1 TPB and Mask of Zorro adaptation, Marvel's Conan, Return of STYRM, and Tops's Marriage of Hercules and Xena, featuring an Alex Ross painted cover.
From here, we've got the Terminator Special from 1998. I say that because it's not necessarily the only Terminator Special. I think I've seen in some places that the one-shot is listed as the Terminator Special, the one-shot being the story that's later referred to as one-shot by James Robinson and Matt Wagner, the one with the dumb greeting card pop-up in the middle of it. This one is simpler. It's just got the Terminator logo. I think that it more closely reflects the movie logo than any of the ones we've had previously. It says right up front, this special is by Alan Grant and Guy Davis. Cover features a generic but seemingly somewhat aged T-800 in close-up of the face. It's a male. Part of the face has been destroyed. The other side is sort of saggy, and then you've got a close-up of him holding a gun next to his face, and it doesn't appear to be a proper gun. It looks like it's some sort of sci-fi gun hybrid with an automatic pistol. And this is drawn by Jeff Darrow. And one of the things I thought about doing is, well, maybe we'll read Hardboiled, the Frank Miller, Jeff Darrow book that maybe was influenced by Frank Miller having worked on Robocop movies. Maybe some of the ideas that didn't fit into Robocop he put into Hardboiled. I thought it might be cool. Thought we might use the Jeff Darrow artwork as the cover for this episode's album art. But A, that would have taken planning. B, I'd have had to brought in a guest, in particular probably the ill Mac, since he recently put together the single issues and I recently bought the trade collection, got a good deal on it. Forgot I even had it. So I was like, hey, that's something I could do in the future. I really didn't feel like that we were going to have time in this episode anyway, though. Something was going to get short shrift. But at some point in the future, maybe we'll work Hardboiled into this show, or maybe it'll end up on an Underguides one of these days. But anyway, we've got Jeff Darrow drawing a Terminator for about the only time. I think he also did a plate for the portfolio a few years back. The first time Dark Horse was doing Terminator material. Bit of a bait and switch, but also none of us thought that Jeff Darrow was going to end up drawing the interiors on this thing. We again open on 2029. We have some tech that more closely resembles the stuff that we had in the Cameron movies, although I think there might be some tweaks on this one as well, or I might just be misremembering. I've seen an awful lot of Terminator variations at this point, Skynet creations, Cyberdyne model, yada, yada, yadas. Now, as you're hearing audio samples, know that it is entirely from this one story. It does not cover the full miniseries, just the special.
Mobility negated.
In and out fast. Grab all the weapons and ammo that you can.
But machine logic has also discovered the benefits of deceit.
Terminator, it's a trap.
And so again, it's 2029. You've got some rebels jumping down a building to blow up a craft because they're trying to, it's supposed to be a transport craft where they're carrying supplies, weapons, things like that. They're trying to do a raid on it, but there's a T-800 inside that's laying an ambush. Kills several of them, but they've got the cool laser rifles, so they're actually able to blow one of his arms off. Despite that, the rebels are killed aside from one who they take to question.
The devil. Evil comes this way. There will be the end of something and the start of something. Someone will be hurt.
Killer man, Donnie's come back. And he ain't alone.
Then we flash back to 1998, and we've got the semi-licensed private investigator referenced in the audio sample. I think that the acting on most of the material that we've had from this source has been good, but I guess maybe this was a rush job because this was the newest story, and it was also a setup story, and so maybe they didn't put as much effort into it as they had their adaptation of the one-shot or the Hunters and Killers miniseries. I think the voice acting almost across the board on this thing is pretty terrible. I could have whipped something up together with my buddies and it would have sounded better than this. I don't know why they made some of the choices they made with regards to who they cast and how they performed. It's bad across the board. But anyway, because you don't get visuals with the audio, the dude seems to be reasonably youngish, 20s, early 30s. He's got a scar over across the left eye, and he wears glasses where the left lens has been blacked out. So maybe there's some ooey gooey bits from the wound. And just as was laid out in the audio, he's been hired by a senator to track down his daughter who's involved with a satanic cult. Really thought they were going to do more with that in the story. It doesn't matter. She's mostly just working with a bunch of bikers. It's weird that they're not, I know this is supposed to be an all-age show, but you would think that these bikers, and you join a group of satanic bikers, they would probably have uses for a lady in the group that wouldn't involve like her doing the accounting for their illicit activities and stuff. That's mostly what she seems to be doing. And apparently they're acting out of a cave for some reason. I don't know. But she's doing tarot readers with the satanic bikers. The one guy that the private eye captured, at least the guy to the cave.
You better go first from here on, tough guy. Move!
The guy was dragging him on a rope.
Gotta be the law.
Let me know what kind of mood your friends are in.
Don't shoot! It's me!
Donnie?
Right friendly bunch, eh? Drop the guns, or you'll be apologizing to Donnie in hell. If I still carried a badge, I'd be taking you in for murder. But you're lucky. You can hand over the girl and I'll be on my way.
They all have automatic pistols. The PI has a double-barreled shotgun. So it's one of those things where they could definitely kill this dude very easily. They already shot the heck out of their buddy. I'm sure they've got some ammo left even after that. This dude's got 2 shots at best. They could have just kept shooting. There was no reason why they had to just like, uh-oh, this guy's got a shotgun. We better lay down our arms. But at this point, we need to flash to the year 2029.
You are Martin Stanford, rank Lieutenant. You have information that Skynet requires about John Connor.
I don't know any Connor.
Your nerves are linked to search capacitors. You will feel your muscles rip and tear. You will feel your limbs break. You will feel your brain dissolve. Where was John Connor born? Where did he spend his childhood? Where did his mother hide him?
I don't know.
You will tell us, Stanford. Tell us. Tell us. Tell us. Tell us. Tell us.
Stamford mumbles and moans, not knowing what he says. How long has the torture gone on? Days? Weeks? Or is it merely hours?
He is close to death. His nerve endings are atrophying. Torture becomes less effective. Release him for exercise.
Martin Stanford can barely stand. His entire body shrieks with pain. He knows he is going to die. His only choice is, under torture from emotionless machines? Or like a man, fighting for what he believes in.
Stop him. Stop him. Interesting. He chose to destroy himself rather than reveal more. He revealed enough. Intense heat, death, a valley, calculating. Preparing Terminators D800L and D810X. Terminators prepared. Time displacement platform ready. All attempts to prevent John Connor's birth have failed. Therefore, he must be eliminated while still a child. Terminators brief. Coordinates set. Time displacement active. Terminators dispatched.
So they're like, okay, we haven't been able to successfully kill John Connor in utero or as a baby, so now we're going to send back a couple of T-800s to kill him as an adolescent. And so they do a male and a female. They land in the desert. They use their X-ray vision to determine where the nearest people are. It just happens to be the satanic bikers and the PI. They just happen to show up during the middle of this sort of Mexican standoff thing. They're coming in from the opening of the cave. The guy's guns are laid down because the daughter doing the tarot reading is apparently a little deeper in the cave. So naked T-800 people pick up the guns, walk deeper in the cave, and basically just start saying, hey, they do like in the first movie, you give us your guns, give us your clothes, give us your transportation, blah, blah, blah. Or at least you'd think that. They really don't. What they do instead is they're just running around naked with guns, asking, does anybody know John and Sarah Connor? And the lead of the satanic bikers is a dude who's called Killer Man. Very on the nose. There's a bit of a problem with Killer Man. Everybody draws this dude like he's a middle-aged biker. Dude's supposed to be 25 years old. He's supposed to kill for the first time at 15, decided, I've killed people, I've stabbed some person, I'm going to be Killer Man from now on. That's going to help me stay out of jail. And if he's a young punk, it makes sense for him to make a lot of brazen moves. But again, everybody draws him as at best 35, at best. And so this dude, while he's got guns on him, held by naked Terminators, he's like, yeah, I know the Connors, but you'll never find them. And then he throws a knife at the chick, Terminator, and the knife lodges in her forehead. And this is one of those things where make it make sense. Like, we know that this thing is fake skin over a metal endoskeleton. How does a knife get lodged in the forehead if it's not got anything substantial to catch on and stay in place? They could have knifed her in the mouth, cheek, eyeballs, ear, anything but the middle of the forehead of the killer robot.
We seek a woman, Sarah Connor.
And her son, John. Do you know them?
Do you know Connor?
Get bent!
Terminated. Do you know Connor?
I guess it was the remnant of the cop in me, but I couldn't stand by and watch cold-blooded murder. Not even a gang of brain-dead Satanists.
The T-800 gal takes offense, starts shooting, but I guess it paused just long enough because of the dumb knife thing that Killer Man and the other biker dudes managed to get behind some cover, and they're also able to get more guns from their stashes, apparently. And so the PI guy freezes. And apparently this dude, not only was he ex-military, but he's also ex-cop. So he's pretty bad at his job at this point, in part because he's going after a gang of bikers with a double-barrel shotgun. And for some reason, again, that doesn't make any sense if you've read a bunch of Terminator comics. The Terminator, since he's not actively firing on them, are disregarding him and going after the bikers. But again, he's holding a rifle, which is going to have a lot more kill power than a pistol. So he's clearly a more imminent threat. He's physically closer to them. They're just walking their naked butts past him. And then he decides he's going to fire on them. The shotgun clearly isn't going to do anything at this point, I would think. Like, he's over here observing. He's seen that they've already taken fire and they've not reacted to it. Taking a knife to the head, not reacting to it. Why he thinks that his shotgun's going to do anything, I don't know. Dude could have just walked the heck out of there and he'd been fine. Grab the gal and leave. But no, he's got to fire on the Terminators.
I had a clear shot at her. My finger was already squeezing the trigger when Cindy Everett decided to jump to her feet.
Oh!
Oh God, didn't mean...
this is not going to be the hero of our story, clearly. This guy is thoroughly incompetent, fatally incompetent, kills the person he's there to pull out of the ranks. Like, you're done, dude. You can just stop now. But he gets backhanded by the male T-800. The Terminators kill all the other satanic bikers except for Killer Man, who gets a hold of a stick of dynamite, blows up the cave, manages to get free before everything starts to collapse in on itself, gets on his bike and rides off. However, he is there long enough to see that the Terminators have started to dig their way out of the mine cave in and see they're still coming after him. They recognize that they're not going to be easy to kill and that he's got in trouble and he better get out of there. They strip the clothing off of the dead bikers that I guess they've also pulled out of the cave in. They could have probably done that first and then cleared the path. I can see some logic to it. Their bodies get dirty while they're getting themselves out of the cave in, and then they put on the clean clothes. I think this is a no prize on my part, though. And the story ends with them riding away on the satanic choppers, leaving the PI guy behind, despite having been in a cave in and having been knocked out and appearing to be dead at the end of the story. He is not dead because he's going to be one of the protagonists of the story to come.
We have weapons.
We have clothing.
We have transport.
We have a quarry who knows what we require. We will pursue it.
Looking to Comicron, who report on August 1998 comic book sales to comic shops. Estimated comics pre-ordered by North American comic shops, based on reports from Diamond Comic Distributors. The top-selling Dark Horse titles were Frank Miller's 300 No. 4, ranked 53rd overall, with 43,647 copies pre-sold. At number 2 for Dark Horse was Star Wars Mara Jade by the Emperor's Hand No. 1, ranked 75th overall. Star Wars Tales of the Jedi Redemption No. 2, at 85th overall. Star Wars X-Wing Rogue Squadron, Mandatory Retirement No. 2 at 103rd overall, and Aliens vs. Predator Eternal No. 3 at 142nd overall. Dark Horse's 6th place title was the Terminator Special, ranked 148th overall, with sales of 15,355 copies. Rounding out the publisher's top 10 was Dark Horse Presents Annual 1998, Madman the Jam No. 2, Oh My Goddess, and Sergio Aragonés Boogeyman. For comparison, the industry's bestseller for August 98 was Battle Chasers No. 4 with 143,545 copies sold.
So as I mentioned earlier, I read this thing on my tablet and I read it all in one sitting, and you should not do that. Absolutely should not do that, because this miniseries that's following is extremely episodic. Repeats itself often. I was keenly aware when I'd hit a point where it's like, oh, I must be in a new issue because they're telling me stuff that I saw just a moment ago.
Dark Horse's website offers the following solicitation copy. The Terminator No. 1. It is the dawn of machines. It is the doom of man. It is the day of reckoning. The wheels are set in motion for the extinction of the human race and the rise of ruthless, intelligent machines known as Terminators. But one man, John Connor, can prevent a bleak future that's already happened from ever coming to be. That means until he's erased from existence, he's the sole obsession of the Terminators. In the bleak wastes of Death Valley, California, 2 of these killing machines have been sent to find Connor as a boy. But the Terminators didn't calculate the possibility of someone finding the boy first. Someone with a killer's past and a score to settle.
But you crack this thing open and it's got a map, an accurate map apparently, of Death Valley. So you can follow along as these guys are trekking around. And then we move over to father and son in Death Valley. This is Ken Norton, who's there with 7-year-old John Norton, his son. And then elsewhere is Sarah Norton, spelled S-A-R-A, who's in a trailer somewhere. We'll get back to her. Oh, by the way, the John Norton, it's J-O-N John. But yes, you've noted there's a John and there's a Sarah, alternate spellings, that you already know where this is going, don't you? So Ken's talking up his son and observing life in Death Valley, and they see a rabbit get away from a wolf or a fox, but then the rabbit gets killed by a cop car that's racing along the desert roads. Seems to traumatize John a little bit. Then we switch back to Killer Man, and again, even though Steve Pugh's drawing him now, he's still an easy 35, but there is some striking differences between Guy Davis and Steve Pugh, which should not be shocking. So every single person in the Guy Davis story is pudgy. They're all overweight, middle-aged people. These are my people. I'm not disparaging my people, mind. But it's a Terminator story where everybody looks doughy, even the satanic biker cult. These are not sexy people. These are not young, dangerous people. These are schlubs, just like me, just like everybody who's listening to this thing. And I know people really, they're people who know art really, really, really love Guy Davis. And I've seen Guy Davis draw Aliens, and I'm now seeing Guy Davis draw Terminators. And he's not really my dude to do either one of those things. He's not really my dude in general. And I can kind of see some of what the art guys see in him, but mostly I'm just disappointed because he's really good at doing Sandman Mystery Theater, people with realistic weights in a realistic period setting. That's that dude's lane, not sexy metal, naked robot people killing folks in the desert. And also, I'm afraid that when Guy Davis was drawing Killer Man, he was just a generic biker dude. He was biker number 4 in the ensemble of any given movie. Steve Pugh is drawing a distinctive character that you immediately recognize. He's sort of got a pointy goatee, gives him the whole satanic vibe. Again, though, I have to stress, aside from a few pentacles and stuff, there's nothing being done with the whole satanic cult thing. I bring it up just because it amuses me. It's really not a plot point. So Killer Man has taken his bike to a local rest stop, restaurant, heavily populated area, sitting in a booth, recognizing that he stands out like a sore thumb, that if cops are looking for him for all the stuff that he's already been getting up to, he's going to be in trouble deep. But he's just sitting there at this table trying to figure out what he's supposed to do because he knows that he's outed himself as a person who knows where the Connors are, which again, wild circumstance that the naked Terminators happen to run right into somebody who knows who John and Sarah Connor is, and they're just going to keep following this dude because the plot says so. And again, they catch up with the dude because apparently the dude's just going the route that you would take, and they're just following the route that you would take, or I think they did some sort of infrared thing where they're able to follow a specific bike. Regardless, he's in a heavily populated common rest place where a lot of people are. The Terminators catch up with him, and you immediately notice the female Terminator has gone from matronly to sick hot 90s pale goth chick with badonkadonk, definitely a sex bomb. Pugh was definitely working out some stuff while he's drawing this girl. The middle-aged guy still looks like a middle-aged guy. He's a very well-built middle-aged guy. He's a little soft in the middle, but he's got big hulking arms. He's a big bulky dude. He's also got, again, really, really distinctive facial features. He looks like a person. He's got bushy eyebrows. He's got kind of wild hair at the sides, even though he's mostly fairly tight and conservative looking. You can suddenly pick this guy out of a lineup where when Guy Davis was drawing him, he was just another stinking dude. So Terminators do as Terminators are going to do. They just run right up to this restaurant and start blowing everybody away needlessly. You could show some discretion. You could catch up with Killer Man. You can catch him in the parking lot. You don't have to make this big spectacle of everything. But no, they've got pistols. They're not running around like AKs or something. So they've got limited ammo. There are cops here too. So they're just aggravating everybody.
Blow them away!
Terminated. Terminated. Data source escaping. This unit will pursue.
How does Killer Man get away? He shoots a fire extinguisher at them and apparently messes with their visual capacity for a moment, and then he slips out the side. It's pretty stupid. But you don't care because Steve Pugh's drawing them. Girl's hot, dude looks cool, everybody looks cool. Even the dumb cops that are getting killed look kind of cool. And then out of nowhere, we get a flashback to the private investigator guy, and he got captured in the Gulf War, and he was held in a cage for 3 weeks, and he can't stand being locked up. And you see that, oopsie, I accidentally killed the person I was supposed to be here to save, and I'm all in my feelings, and I'm like, I guess what I need to do now is try to evade the cops, try to stay out of cover, try to like cover his tracks a little bit. He's trying to drive in the middle of the desert instead of driving on the road so he doesn't get busted because he doesn't want to be put in a cage again. But he also feels the need to track down the Terminators and get justice for the satanic biker chick that he killed himself. This dude has a bunch of motivations. None of them make sense when strung together. If you want justice for the gal that you killed, you can take care of that pretty easily, buddy. You're in the middle of Death Valley. You wouldn't even have to actually do anything. Just keep on walking and the desert will take care of you. If you want to track down these crazy creatures, you don't know what they are, but they're fairly unkillable. Well, you already tried to shoot them with your stupid shotgun. You better figure something else out. He does not ever really figure out anything else that would be appropriate to take down these guys. So he's fairly useless in that regard. And also, again, he wants to do all this while also evading the cops. And the dude was a soldier in a desert, not this desert, but he doesn't have enough sense to not take his sedan through Death Valley and expect things to go well for him. But going back to the rest stop, to both my and presumably Steve Pugh's great great disappointment. After the Terminators kill a bunch of people, more cops show up because there weren't already enough cops around. So they proceed to kill the cops, take their vehicle, even though they smashed the window, they've blown up the windshield. So like, it's gonna be really obvious that this cop car should not be on the road. But they're gonna kill the cops, take their uniforms, and drive off in their car. And so the alt chick with the dumps in the trunk is gonna be wearing a stupid cop uniform the rest of this blasted comic book. Go back to the PI. His sedan gets stuck in a mud bed. An old prospector with his donkey is gonna come try to pull him out, but the axle's blown. So now it's gonna be PI and donkey and prospector for the rest of this thinking miniseries. But meanwhile, Killer Man has gotten back on his hog and is riding, and he's making his way toward Ken Norden, Sarah Norden, John Norden. So John and Sarah, but then you have this Ken guy. And so Sarah is fed up. Like they've been, they're a few months into a year-long granted study of Death Valley, and she's like, this is horrible, and John has no friends, and how are you even educating this kid? It's not clear. He's just playing on his Game Boy all day and being super duper introverted, and she misses her friends. She misses San Francisco, and she wants to go back, and it's like, I need to go back. If you're not coming back with me, then we're separating. And Ken's like, oh honey, I don't know, blah blah blah. But then the drama gets tabled because Killer Man shows up, captures John Norden, and uses him as a hostage because he thinks what he's going to do is use his family to feed to the Terminator so they stop chasing after him. So let's talk about math for a minute. It's well established that the first Terminator movie takes place in 1984, and that means that John Connor could have been born as late as 1985, although there are sources that say that no, he was still born in 1984. He was conceived and born in the year 1984. This story is explicitly set in 1998. So that means John Connor would be somewhere between the ages of 13 and 15. But John Norden is explicitly a 7-year-old. So he would literally be half the age of John Connor and bear only the most passing of resemblance to a John Connor that should be twice his age. And then there's a Sarah Connor with reddish hair. She may or may not be roughly the same age as the Sarah Connor that we have established in the first Terminator. And I don't know if they ever were clear that they know what 2029 John Connor looks like, but there may be some facial recognition in the mix here. But we're going to set that off all to the side and just focus on the fact that John Connor is half the age he should be in this year. Except he's not John Connor, he's John Norden. And why Killer Man would go and happen to find, again, he not only happens to know John and Sarah Connor, apparently, although the miniseries will never confirm that that was legitimately the case. But then when he tries to get a fake one, he gets people who have the same name, no strong physical resemblance, not the right ages. But here's the thing. Here's the tricky part. I went into this thing knowing Alan Grant was writing it. I don't like Alan Grant as a writer. I was surprised I was enjoying the first chapter of the story. The art helps. And so I'm just kind of willing to go with it. It's like I'm nitpicking it now for the podcast. I did catch some of this stuff when I was reading it first time around, but I'm just so relieved that I'm actually enjoying this. Also relieved that I have something else to do besides sit through the stupid work meeting. And as dumb as a lot of this stuff is, it's still doing Terminator stuff that I expect from it. So I'm like, yeah, just keep doing this and I'm going to enjoy this better than the majority of the Terminator miniseries. But because I'm talking about Pugh's art, part of what was keeping my interest up is how idiosyncratic it is. And I'm a Pugh guy from back when he was doing the Demon Wars and Grimjack in the late 80s when I was buying it off the stands. I love this dude immediately. I've always loved this dude. And he's still putting in detailing, right? But then he's doing these weird shortcuts. Like the Ken Norden dude, he has close cropped hair, right? And for some reason, Pugh thinks it's cool to just go ahead and do a bunch of squiggly lines like Charles Schultz for this one character. And so he'll go and do there and they'll do all this cool little extra detailing on the lines of the dude's face. And then he's got freaking Linus hairs. Like, what are you doing here, man? Another instance is the final panel of the story of the first issue. And for some reason, he's just decided to explode the little kid's shirt. So the kid's shirt's like 3 times bigger than it ought to be. It's a 7-year-old wearing like a XXX t-shirt that's been pulled outward. So it's just a gigantic green tinged rectangle. And he knows he's done this because he just does some light detailing around the shoulders and where the cuffs of the shirt should be. But we're not seeing the kid's arm that should be coming out of the end of the cuff. It's just this wash of green. So he's clearly cheating. He knows he's cheating. And also the hand on the kid's shoulder is more squiggles. Looks like Wizard of Id kind of hand on this dude. So it's like Pugh is taking shortcuts, but I don't care because the rest of the art is so good. But also I'm kind of into it because it's so weird how he's doing these obvious like Liefeldian shortcuts on one hand and then this gorgeous detailing on the other hand. And I'm talking literally about the hands on some of this stuff. And I really feel like what's happening happening here because Steve Pugh is an awesome artist, but he's also an artist that he's definitely evolved over the years. And I can see him taking on influences from other creators and seeing, what he can do. And, he's never been a fast artist. He's always been very detail intensive, and that takes time. And I'm thinking he's looking at other artists and trying to copy some of the stuff they do and see what he can get away with. And in particular, I see a lot of Jay Lee-isms, specifically when Jay Lee was aping Simon Bisley's style. And obviously he had a lot of mix of different influences. There's obviously like some Mike Mignola in there and stuff too. But Jay Lee has always been a cheater, and he was extra cheater as he got progressed in his career. I find his work intensely boring at this point, but we'll get into that more on the next miniseries. But I loved when he was aping Simon Bisley, because Bisley's another guy who was able to pack in a lot of detail, but not precise detail. A lot of lines, a lot of energy, but if you drill down into it, a lot of it was just nonsense, taking up space on the page. And Jay Lee did the same thing, and I feel like specifically Pugh's looking at Jay Lee's version of Simon Bisley and incorporating it into his Terminator miniseries. And it's just a wild thing to watch.
Killer Man's gang called themselves Satan worshippers. Good cover, I guess, for the string of vicious robberies they'd committed in Nevada. Then they disappeared. Nobody knows where they'd gone. Till Senator Everett hired me to get his daughter out of their clutches. For $2,000 a week, I'd track God himself. Not that God ever made it to the bleak desolation of California's Death Valley.
I'm Tom Bodette for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you.
Dark Horse's website offers the following solicitation copy. The Terminator #2. The cult leader Killerman has taken the Norden family hostage, with the deadly duo of Terminators hot on his trail. That is, until the local police trail the Terminators and get caught in a vicious battle with the futuristic assassins. But amidst the explosions and general mayhem, more subtle things evolve. A bounty hunter who's tangled with Killerman realizes the Terminator's true nature, and Sarah Connor finally emerges from the shadows. Publication date is listed as October 28, 1998.
So the second issue of the miniseries starts off back at and I keep calling this a rest stop. This is not a rest stop, because when I say rest stop, if you've traveled down roads, a rest stop. In a place like Death Valley, you're probably going to have some sort of shun shelter, because otherwise you're going to die from heat stroke. So you're expecting an open area with some benches, bathrooms, and some covering. And that's not what this is. This has got some palm trees. It's a glass encased structure of considerable size. This reminds me of some of the places that I found in Iceland when we visited and we were traveling around there, where they have these visitor centers where they sell you stuff. It's like a Icelandic Buc-ee's, where they're going to sell you souvenirs, they're going to sell you a burger, you got some clothing options, you got a lot of stuff in there. This is a very nice place that has been wrecked by Terminators, and there's a whole bunch of dead bodies left by Terminators, despite the fact they ran in with a limited amount of ammunition from automatic pistols. And see, this is going out over the news, right? And so again, this is one of those things where it's like, wait, I wasn't expecting that to happen. So there's a woman maid who's working in a hotel room. This is a dive hotel. This isn't a nice place like the Icelandic convention center or a travel center. And she's seeing the reports about the Terminators, and she immediately goes, oh my God, Terminators, John, where are you? And she's spelling it right. It's John. So I will say that as drawn by Steve Pugh in this miniseries, that SARAH Sarah Connor does look like SARA Sarah Norden from the rest of this miniseries. They do resemble each other, so I guess that gives them a little bit of slack there. But much more importantly, Sarah Connor's in this miniseries, and I did not expect that. I assumed that Marvel was the only one who paid to have the rights to do stories with Sarah Connor, and that nobody wants to contradict the movie series. And so when Dark Horse gets the rights back again, I figure they're going to play it super safe. And again, yeah, they're going after John and Sarah just like they always do, but you figured they were going to get distracted and be chasing Killer Mans for every Dark Horse miniseries with like the faintest whiff of Sarah here and there. But no, here's Sarah Connor working at a motel room, plain as day. And so this is getting me excited, because like, oh hey, this is kind of cool, because now this miniseries actually fits into the framework of what we've been doing this year. This year has mostly been about Terminator 2 continuity, Judgment Day continuity, so therefore way more focused on John and Sarah Connor. But I figured we were done with that, and it's like, okay, well now we're going to start the third phase. Like, no. We're still in the second phase. We're still in the T2 phase. We've got John and Sarah Connor actually appearing in stories. But put a pin in that. So there's a woman sheriff named Klein who is intentionally a stocky female, right? She's like, and she's a take no guff, smart, we're going to get stuff taken care of kind of person. So I'm like, oh, okay, we've got our protagonist for this miniseries now. And it's an atypical one. I'm digging that. You know, she's setting up the APB. She's directing where the news can and can't be in the midst of her investigation. She's got distinctive features. You think, oh, okay, this is going to be our gal. And then she just vanishes. And instead we're back to Killer Man holding the family hostage in their trailer with a nonsense plan, slapping the little boy around and stuff. We've got our T-800s dressed like cops, don't look like cops, who don't have sense enough to not, again, drive their police car off-road. They literally destroy their own tires. And it's like, guys, you're going to need those tires if you're going to keep up with, like, Killer Man, right? But see, the plot gods have decided that everybody needs to be on foot now. And so everybody's going to be walking around in Death Valley, despite the fact that there's a disclaimer right there in the title of the location that you have to be working at. Cut back to Sarah Connor. She's trying to find her son. She's freaking out. She's asking her boss. Boss is like, hey, can you like go back to cleaning your rooms instead of worrying about what John Connor's up to? And she's like, I don't work for you anymore. I quit. I gotta go find John. Cut back to the private investigator and the prospector who are using a telescope to see a helicopter that's discovered the cop car that the Terminators are in, but they don't like that. And so through, again, some fairly contrived means, they managed to down this helicopter. And again, the art is screwy as heck because there's several panels in here that are very clearly, Steve Pugh is definitely trying to draw like Dave Johnson and Jason Pearson at the same time with some John McCrae in the mix. It's dynamic. It's definitely a different look for him. It's very obviously not him drawing on model for himself, but that's a pretty sweet combination of artists and he pulls it off fairly well, except he's applying it exclusively to goth chick, police woman, cyborg and not anybody else. And you got this sort of Roger Rabbit thing where you're like, wait, where did this come from? That's realistic. This is a cartoon. But then he goes back and starts drawing her like normal again, sort of, kind of. Cut back to John Connor, who we can see, has sort of the floppy 90s hair, just like John What's-His-Face has. And he's chasing and catching rabbits just as a pastime because he's stuck in Death Valley and he's clearly poor because his mom just, works in cleaning hotel rooms, motel rooms in rundown motels. They don't have a lot of cash. So, okay, poor kid. He's got to hunt bunnies, possibly for food, seemingly for entertainment though. Also, pretty clearly has the body of at least a 13-year-old. Definitely does not look like a 7-year-old. And so Sarah Connor gives him a big hug and he has to let the bunny go. And she starts explaining that they got to run. And he's like, why we got to run? And because she's like, oh, there's bad men coming and I'm going to explain it to you. So what we can surmise from this page is that John Connor has grown up to mid-teens without ever having been told the Terminators exist and that he is the machine Holocaust messiah, which frankly is probably a healthier way to have lived his life than what the John Connor from Terminator 2 Judgment Day experiences. However, that also means that this miniseries that definitely comes out after Judgment Day, as established in T2 as 1997, this is 1998, so they are very clearly letting us know, guess what, guys? In this continuity, Terminator 2 does not happen. This is a sequel to the first Terminator movie from 1984. I don't know how many timelines that is so far, but this is definitely not the same timeline as the previous Dark Horse material where we had Joan instead of John be born at the end of it and the whole timeline gets changed and we're not picking up from Judgment Day. So there's a whole other thing now, but we still have John and Sarah Connor. So, okay, cool. I can grow with that. We're doing a sequel to just the first one. They're doing that thing like Superman Returns and the Halloween movies especially, where they're just going to pick and choose what actually happened and pick up from there, which is something they definitely played with in the Terminator Zero anime that came out, what was it, last year or whatever, just with the wrong characters and also bad characters, and that was horrible, and I really don't want to watch another season of that, and I hope it just quietly disappears and doesn't like hit Monkey Season 2 me. Although maybe that would work actually, because if it does like a Hitman Season 2, maybe the lousy first season will become a great second season. I don't know. Wibbly wobbly Tommy Wimey is the main point that I'm trying to get across here though. So we're flashing back. Let's move back to Killer Man and the family that he's held captive. Now, as we've established, everybody's on foot except Killer Man. Killer Man still has his bike, probably should be able to keep running. He's made a bad decision here. This is not the family he needs. He's not really in a bargaining position. And really, as the Terminators are slowly walking toward his location, he could just shout to them, hey Terminators, this family are the Connors, come kill them and I'll check you later. And he could just hop on his bike and ride away. Would that work? Probably not, because it's stupid, and it's obvious that these aren't the people that the Terminators are looking for, even though he's held his family captive specifically because he wants to use them as bargaining chips with the Terminators, even though he knows that they're not the Connors, and he kind of knows that the Terminators are going to know they're not the Connors. So the whole abduction thing makes no sense. But see, he's not going to ride. What he's going to do is he's going to let the gas out of his motorcycle, and I think he's going to like try to make a thing go explodey, and then the Terminators are coming, and so there's like an old-timey wagon on a hill, and so he's going to get with the dad, and they're going to push the wagon off so that it slams into the Terminators. And this whole time, PI and Prospect are off in the distance just like watching this with their telescope, and then the family and Killer Man hop on ATVs, all-terrain vehicles, and just start riding off into the Death Valley. And it's pointed out later on that there doesn't seem to be a plan at work, and you're driving the family with probably limited fuel into Death Valley while being chased by killer cyborgs, but Death Valley itself can indeaden you. So it's just, again, dumb, but drawn by Steve Pugh and drawn by an Alan Grant that I think understands the assignment, because he just keeps things moving, keeps throwing action beats at you. Don't think about it. It's just going to be dumb fun. He knows what he's doing. I know what he's doing. We've agreed that this is what we're going to be doing. It's actually kind of cool.
Frederick Austin was 15 years old when he knifed his first victim and christened himself Killer Man. He's seen a lot of death in the 10 years since, but nothing like this.
Damn! 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 Damn!
Oh, also funny, the middle-aged dude T-800 takes the brunt of the wagon because for all of his future knowledge, he doesn't know enough to get out the way of a stinking wagon. And he gets wrecked bad enough to where it's obvious he has a bunch of robot parts now. And so the PI guy, almost at the end of the second issue of the miniseries of 4 issues total, so halfway through this thing, more than halfway when you factor in that he was in the special, only now is like, oh my God, the robot. It's at this point that Alan Grant decides that, hey, we're going to introduce the China Lake Naval Weapons Research Facility, where mad scientist dude is showing off to military brass his KZ-1 robot killing machine. For some reason, this thing looks like a microscope, except it's like 15 feet high and has like claws and missiles and like a rail gun and stuff. And so we have the military guys sitting their tanks after this thing. I don't know, it's not even on treads. It's on like rotating barrels or something. I don't know what this is supposed to be, but it wrecks the heck out of the tanks. And so mad scientist dude, I am not looking up his name, Dr. Newbert, fine, it was right there in the panel, Dr. Newbert, he will be mad scientist going forward. Do not expect me to remember Dr. Newbert. And by the way, I am sober. I know it sounds like I've been drinking. I'm drunk on this miniseries. So Dr. Newbert's like, hey, I'm glad you like this demonstration. I look forward to making these for you and you giving me billions of dollars. And the military is like, no, we're going to arrest you and keep all of your designs and not pay you. And so mad scientist guy, see I'm already doing it, is like, oh no, in that case, I'm going to use my KZ-1 voice activated killing machine to kill all of you. And then I'm going to go out on the road and see if I can sell this to the Russians instead. I realize that in the year 2025, the United States of America is getting up to a lot of stupid nonsense. Like some of the stupidest stuff we've ever done has been concentrated in the year 2025. So I realize the bar has been lowered on the world's expectations of the kind of dumb stuff we were going to pull. But even today, even with the absolute morons that are running things right now, I just don't think they're stupid enough to be like, oh, hey, you've got a killing machine here. We're going to arrest you and steal your killing machine from you instead of just giving you a bunch of money so you can make us a bunch more killing machines. But Alan Grant, perhaps rightly, thought that this was where we were at or going to be.
Debuts this month include Dark Horse's Blast Core and DC's trade paperbacks Babylon 5, The Price of Peace and Bugs Bunny and Friends. Tops in October 1998 comic book sales was again Uncanny X-Men number 362, selling 138,548 copies. Dark Horse rankings led with Buffy the Vampire Slayer number 2, 53rd overall, moving 43,717 units. Following were Sin City, Just Another Saturday Night in 68, Star Wars Jedi Academy Leviathan number 1 in 91st, 1st, Mara Jade number 3 in 93rd, Jedi Redemption number 4 in 101st, X-Wing Retirement number 4 in 109th, Ghost number 2 at 148th, Masazukatsura's Shadow Lady, Dangerous Love in 152, Sergio Aragona's Day of the Dead at 159th, and just inside the Dark Horse top 10, Terminator number 2 with 160 ranking overall, selling 11,899.
Somewhere close, the present and the future have been allied.
D800L. Report location.
Silence.
Malfunction.
The silence of the desert.
Possible error in time displacement. This unit will proceed alone.
D10X.
You were delayed. Reason?
Unknown. No relevant data. Possible error in time displacement.
Infrared reveals presence of several humans. Distance 1 mile.
Dark Horse's website offers the following solicitation copy. The Terminator number 3. As a violent storm breaks over Death Valley, the former cult leader Killerman heads deeper into the wastelands to escape the pursuing Terminators. But not too far from the hunt, other events unfold that may become unexpected links to the Terminator technology. At the China Lake Naval Weapons Base, a scientist develops the cutting edge in artificial intelligence, but he's not exactly willing to hand it over to the military. Meanwhile, Killerman realizes the Terminators aren't his only trouble.
Goth Panda from Body Bags is pretty ripped up too. She's got a bunch of exposed metal, but they are still insisting on wearing the cop uniforms that are totally trashed, again to my great disappointment. And by the way, when I say Panda, I don't just mean that he's giving her Jason Pearson faces with, and also, oh, by the way, I forgot, John Bogdanov is in this mix too. I guarantee you, Steve Pugh has been looking specifically at John Bogdanov, probably even more specifically on Man of Steel, and perhaps even more specifically, probably at his ethnocentric characters in books like that. And he's drawn his version of John Bogdanov Panda, including the honkers, except they're buried under the police uniform. Also fun, Ali Grant has been watching the Discovery Channel circa 1997, and so he keeps bringing up cool stuff that he found out about Death Valley. Like, apparently they have these salt needle things that are like these gigantic thorns that will rip flesh to shreds. And so when the Terminators have to run through these things, their fake flesh and boots and everything get ripped all up, their outfits get ripped all up. Another chopper shows up trying to find all these people. They use this to debut the wagon that the Connors are running around in. It's actually fairly similar to the one that the Nordstroms or whatever the heck the names are is in. So it's like they're trying to sell the lie despite nobody ever buying into it. But here's the caption. The real Sarah Connor has had her escape route planned from the day she arrived in Death Valley. If this one is blocked, she has a dozen others to fall back on. And then John says, Mum, what's happening? M-U-M. I'm not the only one who noticed. Alan Grant is British. John Connor's apparently British now. Mum, why are we running from the bad men and the police? Her son's questions tug at her heart, but who would believe her story about robots from the future and a war between man and machine, well illustrated by movies like Terminator 2 Judgment Day? She knows there is no one she can rely on except herself, but perhaps it's time she shared what she knows. John, about your father, there are some things you should know. I'm sorry, it's just like, okay, you've let this guy get to teenage years. You haven't even told him about his father, who's the military leader from the future, and how he's going to be the machine messiah. I understand that messed the kid up. We've seen that happen. Eddie Furlong has not had a good life since he played John Connor. All he had to do is play John Connor. His life got all messed up. Can't imagine how things would have gone for actual John Connor in an actual sensical narrative, but we're not doing sensical narratives here. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I didn't remember that the Connors showed up again at this point. I thought they had already gone, but just know that they will do nothing substantial in this story, and even if they turn up again, it's not going to matter. They are just an aside over and over again to let you know that the Connors do exist in this version of the timeline, and maybe they're going to do something with them later on. But then again, this is Dark Horse. Maybe we're going to forget all about this. I don't know. We're just going to take it as it comes. So we're following railroad tracks to a ghost town, and then it just so happens, because there's not enough coinky dinks in this story, that we're going to have the once a year rainstorm in the middle of Death Valley that can potentially create mudslides that will wreck everybody, and the Terminators narrowly avoid that with their exposed calves from when they got ripped up by the salt needles. And just to top it off, we're going to have the hot chick Terminator Terminator get blasted with, she's gonna attract lightning, get blasted. You have this one cool panel where she's got like this gigantic smoking mouth and just looks like spooky, but they don't harm the face because they're gonna still get use out of the face. They're still gonna get use out of the body. She's not toasty or anything like that. She just had a bad moment that she's gonna recover from. And see, the male Terminator dude who looks way worse, he manages to snatch her up from a mudslide. And yes, there's a panel where the chick is now drawn Adam Warren style. Pugh's just having a day here, okay? Oh, and then immediately the next panel is Jay Lee face on the robot dude. It's just crazy. And then we're back to John Bogdanov. So the one Terminator saves the other Terminator. And you might be like, well, I mean, that kind of makes sense. That's what you'd want to do. This is a resource and you want to continue to have access to this resource because these guys have been struggling to get the job done. But Terminators don't generally be like watch my back kind of people. They're pretty cutthroat. But see, I've already talked about this so far. The male T-800 arrived late in the middle of Death Valley in the search for John and Sarah Connor. And the fact that he arrived late puts him in question, puts him under suspicion pretty much immediately. The female Terminator has been more along the lines of what you expect, just doggedly determined, on mission, doesn't care about anything else, and has been questioning this dude who keeps not quite doing Terminator type stuff. Like, he's concerned about life, he minimizes the number of people he kills, except when he kills all those poor innocent people at the rest stop, and he's asking all kinds of philosophical questions, and she's like, that does not compute, go do more terminating, what are you doing, I think you're screwed up. She's the one who gets struck by lightning. You'd think that maybe that would fry her too, but no, they just continue this dynamic throughout the miniseries. It's actually pretty cool. It's one of the things I liked when I was reading it. It's like, what is going to go on with this dude? Honestly, it's not going to amount to anything. It's just color for the miniseries. Alan Grant's just having fun. He's just playing with ideas, not going to amount to anything. That's why I haven't brought it up so far, but this is actually throughout the entire miniseries, okay? And then our PI guy keeps having flashbacks to the Gulf War, the horrific things he saw during the Gulf War, which is an odd take. Maybe the British saw some stuff that we didn't. I know that the British took the Gulf War a lot harder than we did. Oh wait, this is the wrong Gulf War. This isn't even the Gulf War we dragged the British into. This is the other one from the 90s. Desert Storm, Desert Shield. We built up a heavy military presence over a period of months, and then we went into Iraq and we blew up a bunch of their infrastructure, and almost immediately, like within a month, Saddam Hussein surrendered, and we leveled all these horrible restrictions upon the country, and because they went, I mean, they deserted that time. They went and they invaded Kuwait. They thought they were going to get away with it. They thought we were all pals, but America had loyalties to the Kuwaitis. I guess they had a better deal with those guys than they would have had with Saddam, and so they're like, no, we're going to protect them and throw you out, even though we've been covering you and giving you weapons for years and years and years. But again, since that was mostly the U.S., and it's almost like, Bush lost after winning the Iraq War because the American people had so little concern about Kuwait, and we're just relieved that we didn't get dragged into another Vietnam, and it was already over by that point. And actually, kind of the fact that he took us into Iraq in the first place had a lot of people kind of ticked off, I think, about it. And then Bill Clinton wins, mostly because they let the economy slide while they were worrying about what was going on with Iraqi oil. And so this dude having all these flashbacks to the nightmare scenarios in the first Gulf War is just like, that was the Scud War, right? That was the war where we basically just watched everything on green screens, and for the most part we didn't lose that many people, and it was basically just us steamrolling over the Iraqis. And we were told we were going to be this horror show and would dig in and we'd be doing another NOM for years and years and years. No, we built up and then in a month and we steamroll over them. But this dude keeps having these flashbacks, and you think it's going to play up into the whole Judgment Day thing, but again, Judgment Day didn't happen, so I don't even know what this is here for, and it's not going to amount to anything. It's just an interesting visual while we're going through this crazy story. And it's nighttime and it's rainy and everybody's been through a lot, and so this is the point where the two Terminators are having their philosophical discussion. And then it's the next day, and the PI and the prospector and his donkey, who he is very affectionate with in a way that becomes suspect after a while, given that it's just two of them in the desert for long periods of time. The donkey gets loaded up into some sort of electric train that's still on the tracks, and also we get a moment to take in the beauty because overnight all these desert plants have sprouted up from the rain. I don't think that's quite how that works, but I didn't watch the same Discovery Channel stuff that Alan Grant was watching. Maybe it does work that way. The family briefly catches Killer Man napping in the ghost town that they just decided to stay in for no apparent reason besides they were tired. I thought the whole point was to get far away from the Terminators, but that's not the problem too, is Killer Man keeps talking about how he's going to turn the family over to the Terminators, and he's using them as bargaining tools, but then he's not actually bargaining with the Terminators at any point. He's not leaving the family behind for the Terminators. And so they're just keep hanging out together for no apparent reason, just to continue the hostage storyline, because that's the storyline they've started. He could abandon them at any time. They could have turned on him at any time, but they happen to catch him napping. They jump on him, but they're also wimps, and Killer Man manages to knock them back again and get his gun back again, but only just in time for the Terminators to catch up with him in the ghost town that they shouldn't have been hanging out at in the first place. And so Killer Man holds John Norden hostage and then sends Kid Norden out to talk to the Terminators, but he's all like, actually, I'm Kid Norden, we're not the Connors. And the Terminators are like, yeah, you don't mean anything. Male superfluous to mission terminated. So they just gun down the dude that's been one of the leads for the last 3 issues. He's gunned, but he's not coming back. And then that freaks out Sarah, rolls backward, Norden, who scratches Killer Man's face and successfully distracts him. But then Killer Man again recovers control, and he's like, these are the ones you want. Here is John and Sarah Connor. Here you go. And the Terminator's just sort of standing there going, okay, that's good. That's what we've been waiting for. But they happen to be standing on the train tracks and not noticing that the electric train is barreling down on them. Not doing anything with Killer Man, not doing anything with the quote unquote Connors. Briefly distracted when Killer Man starts shooting at them again, even though we've established that shooting at them is not going to do a lot of good, and they could just kill all 3 of these people immediately. Why are they even having a discussion? Particularly since, again, we're presented with a 7-year-old John Connor that is clearly not the 14 or so year old actual John Connor that they're looking for, but enough of a distraction that they get hit by the electric train. And that's the end of the 3rd issue. And I think maybe at this point, from my description, you're kind of understanding now why you really shouldn't read this in one sitting. It really is something you need to serialize, because it's just things happen, and then some more things happen, and there's more things that happen, and you don't want to think about any of the things that are happening because none of these things make any sense.
Publication date is listed as November 25th, 1998. Debuts this month include Marvel's Conan, Scarlet Sword. The bestseller for November 1998 was Say It With Me Folks, Uncanny X-Men number 363, posting 136,591. Dark Horse's top book was, again, Buffy the Vampire Slayer number 3, 44th overall, 46,125 units. After that comes Star Wars Crimson Empire 2 number 1 at 58, Mara Jade number 4 at 78, Star Wars Jedi Academy Leviathan number 2 at 86, Jedi Redemption number 5 at 87th, Grendel Black White and Red number 1 at 99, Ghost number 3 at 140th, Oh My Goddess the Devil and Miss Ord number 1 at 145th, Gunsmith Cat's Bad Trip number 6 at 152nd, Shadow Lady number 2 at 155th, and finally Blade of the Immortal. On Silent Wings number 7, or the 27th issue of the series of miniseries, at 156th. The 12th ranked Dark Horse title was Terminator number 3, at 157th overall, thanks to 10,185 sold. Is it worse to say that the Terminator books are doing Sergio Aragonés numbers, or vice versa?
You can mock, but the devil is real. He looks after his own.
Guess he took the day off, huh?
Dark Horse's website offers the following solicitation copy. The Terminator number 4. The Terminators have hit Death Valley like a runaway train. Literally, the Terminator duo, male D, 800L and female D, 810X, have never been closer to exterminating their query, humanity's would-be savior John Connor. But there are 2 things standing in their way. One is the bounty hunter Van Dirk, who blames the cyborgs for the death of an innocent girl. The other is a steam-powered locomotive barreling straight at them. Publication date is listed as December 30th, 1998.
4th issue is apparently a great opportunity to do a time jump. We're further down the train tracks in seemingly another ghost town, and it's the private investigator guy and not Sarah Connor, who has her leg braced with wooden planks and rope, and they've got some dynamite, and they're like waiting for the Terminators to come for them. Then we flash backward to when the train hit the Terminators, and everybody's kind of having a discussion about their trauma, and then they all get loaded up into the electric train. And then Killer Man wants to come on, and PI guy like puts a gun on and is like, no, you can't come. And he's like, you can't leave me here. And he's like, okay, you only come if you give me your gun. And it's like Killer Man has been not doing what he's supposed to be doing this entire time. It makes no sense that he doesn't force his way on the train. It makes no sense that he doesn't have a gun battle with the PI guy. Why is this even a discussion that's happening? Why is Killer Man suddenly totally neutered? Can he not drive a train? I don't know. And then they're like, hey, John, your dad just died, but you want to hang out with his donkey? Maybe this donkey licking your face is going to make you feel a little bit better. Male Terminator has been almost completely denuded. Female Terminator still manages to have a human arm, most of her human face, tatas, badonkadonk, still there. But see, the legs coming out of the badonkadonk are robot legs, and then she has a robot midriff, and her back's ripped to heck, and one of her arms is denuded. And it's just like, it's too late. You might as well just like strip them both. We don't need this anymore. This is not doing anything for us. This is sick. She's gross. She's like a corpse girl. She was already pale to begin with. You could have just finished ripping her up. But I guess they want to continue to differentiate. So somehow, trains on the tracks, girl Terminator manages to run ahead up a plateau and then jump onto the train and crash through it. She gets kicked by the donkey, but then she does a Mongo from Blazing Saddles and punches the donkey so hard she immediately kills it. But of course, in the moment, she just like swings his head back and has his tongue hanging out. It's a comedy beat, but also she just killed the poor donkey, which means she's broken the prospector's heart. And so everybody has to jump off the train in motion. That's where the mom breaks her leg. The Terminator is fighting Killer Man while the other people are on the ground trying to tend to themselves and figure out what the next step is. Q has finally given up on Hot Chick Terminator. Now she's been in the wreckage of the train. At some point the train wrecks, and so she's all burnt up, and so she's the blackened Terminator. And then the dude Terminator is now the shiny Terminator with a bunch of parts missing. Particularly, he has like a railroad beam that he's applied to his leg so that he can like be Mr. Peg Leg Terminator walking around. Somehow these guys are going to catch up with the human beings who are still mostly mobile. But there's going to be a little bit of distraction because remember the mad scientist guy from earlier? He sees the Terminators running around. Is like, oh, this is a great opportunity to continue to test my robot, even though there's nobody here to see it happening. I'm not involved in this in any way. I have only things to lose and nothing to gain. But yeah, let me turn it loose on these cyborg guys, and the cyborg guys do some pretty heavy damage to his robot killing machine, but also vice versa. Even though we've established that this device is voice activated, the Terminators turn the tables by shooting the controller out of his hand and then just literally walk up to the killing machine and push it off a cliff until it blows up. And that scientist man just goes like, whoops, and he just goes back to his vehicle and just drives off again. Just a total distraction play of a subplot. And again, forget logic. No. So we get to the Terminators, get into the ghost town. The PI has set up booby trap made of wood to go up against the Terminators. He's also got some dynamite left. Still manages to get himself shot. Mom gets herself punched like a donkey, but for some reason she doesn't die. I gotta tell you, here toward the end of the story, Pugh's still getting the job done, but he's definitely starting to skip all the details, and you can kind of tell, you're not being as wild as you were. Still solid, still works, but he's starting to recall like Frank Teran and Guy Davis, and so the malfunctioning male Terminator catches the PI.
Magnifying.
For a long, still moment, time seemed to stand still. And then
makes it look as though he's killed the guy, chooses not to kill the guy. And there's another element I forgot to mention because there's so many things to talk about here. So the letterer of this book is Gary Fields, and throughout the miniseries, it's been partially narrated by the PI writing in a journal with the expectation that he's going to die over the course of this assignment, and he wants somebody to know the facts, even though, again, we've established that the guy probably doesn't want evidence lying around because he's afraid the cops are going to catch him and put him in a cage, but he's also creating his own evidence. And so apparently he's been writing this throughout the trip while not actually effectively doing much of anything until these last portions, and then even then not that much. So one of the Terminators finds the book, tosses through it for a second, then literally tosses it aside, fails to notice that there's a lit multiple sticks of dynamite near to them.
Evade.
The dynamite blows up, and that finally ends the Terminator threat. And then one of the pages from the journal is floating around saying, I'm writing this down in case the worst happens. I want people to know the truth. And that's how the miniseries ends. Now, I have to say again, reading this in one sitting with as much repetition as there was and as much nonsense as there was, by the time I got to this 4th issue, I was pretty much done with the miniseries. Literally and emotionally, logically, and psychologically, I was pretty well done with this thing by that point. I was glad that I enjoyed as much of it as I had, but the ride, much like the electric train, was over at this point. And it just sort of like, okay, it's been nothing but nonsense so far. Let's just have a nonsense ending and wrap this thing up. Oh, but I forgot. So the diary entries over the course of the miniseries, this quasi-narrative thread throughout it, it's written as though it's written into the journal. And it's extremely hard to read those passages, and there's a lot of them. And it definitely frustrated me and it annoyed me, and I just didn't, and nothing of real value is contributed by those sections. But also the miniseries ends with one of those pages, but by this point they've realized that the other ones were hard to read, so the guy's handwriting apparently changes right here at the very end, because nothing about this series has made a lot of sense. So why wouldn't the guy just maybe he got injured and he let John write that section. And see, the thing is, Alan Grant is going to do the next miniseries, and I understand that some of these characters are going to carry on into that series, and that next one ain't going to be drawn by Steve Pugh, so that's going to be an interesting episode.
Debuts this month include DC's Future Cop, LAPD, and Image's Dracula vs. Zorro collection, Todd McFarlane Presents, Kiss Psycho Circus magazine, Tomb Raider Witchblade Revisited Special, and Witchblade Tomb Raider. The latter was the top seller for December 1998, with 190,720 copies. On the Dark Horse tip, Buffy the Vampire Slayer #4 maintains, ranked 38th overall with 51,805 copies. Following was Plain Flavor Star Wars #1 at 40th, Star Wars Crimson Empire 2 #2 at 73rd, Mara Jade #5 at 93rd, Jedi Academy #3 at 103rd, Star Wars. The Jabba tape at 107th, Grendel. Black, White, and Red #2 at 120th, Sergio Aragonés Gru and Rufferto #1 at 142nd, Ghost #4 at 150th, Oh My Goddess #2 at 159, Ghost Special, Scary Monsters at 165th, Blade of the Immortal #28 at 168, and Shadow Lady #3 at 169. The Terminator #4 wishes it was doing Sergio Aragonés numbers, coming in 14th place at Dark Horse, 172nd overall, with 9,536 copies sold. After that is Subhuman #2 in 182nd place, Dracoin, The Hidden War #3 in 188, and Dark Horse Presents #138 with a Terminator cover feature in 206th place with a mere 5,406 sold. This has been an inauspicious return to Dark Horse, a house built on licensing, but another James Cameron film laid out the foundation and the support beams. Besides Star Wars and a few notable creator-owned properties, Dark Horse is making its bag off far less expensive Japanese manga imports. Properties staffed with well-known industry talent barely coming within the top 200 titles and dipping under 10K in sales aren't worth the licensing fees. There will only be one more solo Terminator miniseries in the second Dark Horse period, and this property is not known for its fidelity to any given publisher. We'll finish out this year's coverage under Mike Richardson's roof, but don't start hanging portraits on the walls. For instance, this material won't even be collected by Dark Horse in its own trade paperback. The first attempt was made by the short-lived early aughts publisher iBooks, who you may recall also released the second collection of Alex Rost's now comics miniseries Terminator the Burning Earth, as well as a collection of Marvel Malibu's Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and most of Cybernetic Dawn, leaving out the #0 finale, and all of that sans color. This collection was in color, titled The Terminator, rewired and released on August 8, 2004. Back cover reads,
a collection of the Terminator tales by some of the comic industry's most popular and award-winning writers and artists. Part 1. Unknowingly, Kyle Reese went back in time to protect Sarah Connor from the second of two Terminators sent from the future to alter the past. In this story, we encounter the very first Terminator to be sent back through time, a female version of the T-800 model, but just as deadly, if not more so. Her mission? To kill John Connor's mother. Part 2. A new pair of Terminators have been sent from the future to find John Connor. But what's at stake for the lowly bounty hunter named Van Dirk? And can humanity's future be saved, or does Skynet have another ace up its sleeve? Part 3. In the 21st century, Skynet and its Terminators are on the brink of defeat at the hands of John Connor. Meanwhile, half a world away in the wreckage of the Soviet Union, a new breed of Terminator has been created, this time copied from real people. They could be anyone, and no one will know until it's too late. Featuring stories by James Robinson and Matt Wagner, Alan Grant and Guy Davis, Torrin Smith and Bill Jaska. Front cover by Jeff Darrow. Back cover adapted from an illustration by Matt Wagner. Printed in the USA, $17.95 US dollars, $25.95 Canadian, and £12.99 UK.
With prices like those, it's no wonder iBooks didn't make it. So only the Terminator Special made it into the collection. This was also the case 2005 digital comic DVD The Terminator, Hunters and Killers, produced by Eagle One Media. This was the source for the audio plays that you heard in this episode. You may also remember them turning up in our coverage of the Hunters and Killers miniseries, and when they adapted The Terminator, one shot as the other Sarah Connor. This one adapted the special as Showdown in Death Valley, but did not give the follow-up miniseries the same treatment. It took until the March 12, 2008 release of The Terminator Omnibus Volume 2 before we finally got all of this Alan Grant material in one place, in color, and in the exact same order as presented in this episode. Also included is The Terminator, The Dark Years, the second of 3 Grant miniseries, and I sure hope he keeps the same level of fun going forward, even though that middle chapter's art sure ain't Steve Pugh.
New targets acquired.
Gas 55,555. GNR-JB 395. All-Around Arbiter. Alan Boyce Jr. Altais. Angry Mr. Bungle.
Anon Yamato NSFW.
The Bat Pod, Between the Pages blog.
Billy Hines.
Who added good stuff. Lald IRL at the Robocop stuff. Never been able to identify Grant's thing. I'm told it's humor, but I've read enough to be baffled by that explanation. The Ocean Robocop music punched me in the Prousts.
Chris Dunford.
Crashland.
Derek W.C.
Doc Strange.
Dirk Ashton. Ed Moore at Teal Productions. Van Hol's Podcast. Hal Kolbeck. History of Comics and Film. Illegal Machine.
Janice Andrews.
Jared Keane.
Keith G. Baker.
King Dinosaur.
King Nighthawk.
Lamar the Revenger.
Luminous. Martin Kessler. Michael. Priceless Boys Art, who added of the T2, Cybernetic Dawn Tumblr. I have no idea the context, but this shit goes crazy. Red. Average Lane Enjoyer.
Relatively Geeky Podcast Network.
Richard Field.
Robot 17.
Ryan Daly.
Who added, I can only assume my part of this episode is a couple seconds of conversation we had 3 years ago. Looking forward to listening. Santiago Revico Lepi. Sexy Paradiddle.
Superbound.
SW3GB1TCHH.
Thirsties, New and Used. And
Zanzajan.
You have been listening to Terminator Now, a Rolled Spine podcast. It's in no way associated with Hemdale Film Corporation, James Cameron, not even Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm just the best impersonator Frank could find. But I'm pretty good, right? No infringement of rights are intended, and it's all covered by fair use. Anyway, nobody's making any money on this thing, and hardly anyone's listening anyhow, so don't waste your lawyer's time.